Hey guys, Scott and Vanessa Martindale here with Blended Kingdom Families. At BKF, we believe now is the time to change the modern day interpretation of the blended family.
Absolutely, you guys. As a blended family ourselves, God laid it on our hearts to build a ministry that helps support blended families by equipping your marriage, uniting the family unit, and igniting your faith. Our mission is that you would be touched by God and experience His goodness through this ministry, that your family would have practical skills, resources, and tools to help you live that abundant blended life.
Whichever is good for you.
Okay, all right.
Hey guys, Scott and Vanessa Martindale here with Blended Kingdom Families, and we are super pumped to have an amazing guest with us, Summer Butler.
So sweet.
It is awesome to have you here. And just so you guys know, Summer is the author of Blended, Aligning the Hierarchy of the Heart and Home. She's the founder of the Blended Book Company, blended family ministry geared towards health and healing of individuals inside the blended family. You are right up our alley.
Yes.
And we are excited to have you here.
Yay,
Yes.
thanks for having me.
So,
Absolutely.
Summer, let's just get started. Tell us about your story. What's your blended family dynamic?
Yeah, I grew up in a blended family, actually, so I kind of have that angle as well, like twice over blended family. Lots of stepmamas and stepdaddies, and so I feel like really the heart of this ministry came then. I didn't know it then, right? But that kind of took me off track for a lot of years. I blamed God for a lot of the hurts in my childhood and in my life and the brokenness. I just didn't understand how a good God could make that possible. So that kind of got me off track for quite some time until I met my husband. And that was about, what did we say, 9 years ago? We were trying to remember. About 9 years ago, I met Andy, and he had a pretty firm walk with God at the time. And I came into the relationship kind of a free spirit and having some spirituality, but not necessarily rooted in God. And so that was kind of a thin gray line that pulled Andy towards, kind of sucked him into that. And we both got off track for a while. So I know we talked earlier about when we got married and we actually renewed our vows. And part of that was because we refound God together. And I think because of that and because of the struggles we had along the way, you know, those first 5 years of marriage, we really realized that there's so much brokenness, even inside blended families, you know, that come together. And we sought help and got marriage counseling and went through Reengage, which is a marriage ministry, but it's not specific for blended families.
Yeah.
And while it did great, I mean, it's a great program, but there's just so much dynamic to a blended family relationship that is not often talked about prior to or even in the beginning of those marriages. And God just really laid it on my heart to have a blended family ministry and a book that kind of outlined my struggles throughout the first 5 years. And kind of walk families through the struggles that I know that will come up, right?
Yes.
And that was kind of the heart of the ministry and the book and what led up to that, really.
No, that is so good. And you gave me a sample copy of your book, and I've been reading it. And you guys, it is amazing. So I know it's on Amazon already, Summer, but officially releasing on the 29th. So yay, God, we are so excited for Summer. You know, and Summer, you kind of touched on this already, but can you tell us a little bit more about your book and, you know, if there was anything like specific where you were like, I have to write this, like this is where I'm sticking my dagger in the sand. Like
3 years ago, I say kind of leading up to this event, we functioned well as a blended family, and I think there's a difference between functioning and thriving, you know, and I think we did okay, we did well, but there were just bitter resentments that built in my heart along the way. And I say some of that, you know, I was a full-time stay-at-home stepmom, I guess I still am, but walked into that role different than when I was outside of our marriage. And so being a full-time, you know, stepmom or stay-at-home mom, it just comes with a lot of the grunt work, the day-to-day grunt work. And sometimes the reward doesn't fall on your weekend. And so that I think, you know, unconsciously built this resentment that I felt in my heart. And there was, I guess it was probably October, November of 2017. And my oldest had winter formal. And so like, I love doing all the things, like getting all the things in order, the texts, the flowers, all that.
Yeah.
And I was driving down to Dallas to pick up his text, and I'm kind of like going through the plans for the weekend. And I realize as I'm going, like the dance doesn't fall on our weekend.
Oh, wow.
So like, I instantly just had this like gut punch of, this is just not fair. Like, this is not fair. I do all the work, I get none of the reward. And I called my husband, and I'm just like, completely going on and on and on about, it just feels like I've worked for 2 weeks without a paycheck. And, he trying to be supportive. I don't want to say he fed into it, but he allowed me to vent, right? And as soon as I hung up the phone, God was like, get off the highway, get off the tollway. And so I've never really heard a command like that strong before from God. And it was really honestly impossible to ignore. So I pull off the road, and he said, I want you to write this down. And he said, you are not raising these children so that they grow up and call you their mother. You are raising these children so they grow up and call me their father.
Yeah.
And it really just put in perspective who I was in their life and who he was calling me to be. And kind of through the midst of some refining over the next few months, he brought out some of those logs in this refining fire that I had been struggling with.
Yeah.
And I think for the intent to put forth this book, like to just let it all out, like here's some things you may struggle with as a stepmama or a blended family. And really the only problem I think that I have figured out that I have is myself, and that's really humbling. So the book itself is really a self-help book. It's a self-inventory approach. And I think, there's a ton of like how-tos as blended families, but this really looks at yourself and how to be the best self through a refiner's fire, and ways that you need to work through past stuff, forgiveness, the hierarchy of your relationship, conflict resolution, communication, things that you really need to approach differently in a blended family model.
Yeah.
There's a lot of external influence in a blended family that you just can't control, and the only person you really can is yourself. And so I think that was really a defining moment for the book, and something that is written in the book, and I had to start there. That was straight from the Holy Spirit, and I knew it was going to define, our life going forward, but also this ministry. And there's a verse that God kind of gave me through the process, and it talks about him being the chief shepherd, and that we are to shepherd those that he puts in our flock. That verse I really hold on to, because whether they're bonus or biological, right, they're placed there by him, and we are to shepherd our flock and not lord over them and not be controlling, but show them his way. And I think that's what he was saying to me, like on the side of the Dallas North Tollway. And then, towards the end of it, the verse talks about him being the chief shepherd, and that we work for the crown that will never fade. And so I think when we focus in life on things that we've worked so hard for, and we want worldly rewards, they're never going to come. We're never going to be satisfied. Our expectations are in the wrong place. But when we focus on the heavenly gifts that we'll receive because we've lorded his flock well, I think that's where we find our joy and our peace and our comfort is in him. So no matter what sheep he brings to us, whether they're bonus or biological, our job is to shepherd them, the way that he shepherds us as a father. So that's really kind of been a verse I've clung to as well, and write about in that first chapter.
That's good stuff.
That is, I was like, wow.
Man,
Yeah.
you made a comment, and one of that phrase, the reward is not on my weekend. I've never heard that before, but what a powerful, powerful phrase. Because we do, even as parents or as step-parents, we know that we're given a gift of being a parent. We know that's going to be hard.
Yeah.
But I think somewhere in the back of our mind, we're like, we're going to get that moment.
Yeah.
Are we going to
Yeah.
get that
Yeah.
hug or that affirmation?
Yeah.
Or are we going to see that joy in our child's eyes? As biological, you're going to be there.
Right.
Because there's nowhere else to be.
Right.
But as a blended family, that may happen, but it may not be on your weekend.
Yeah.
What an amazing concept to think about. So that was just phenomenal words of wisdom there.
And I love what you said, when he spoke to you in the car. I mean, that is just everything, like, hit me in the head with a 2x4 because, It's
hard. And I think, I attributed it to my step kiddos. Like, I think part of me was seeking a title, but in a weird way. Like, I know I never wanted to replace mom. That's never been even a conversation or an idea. And it's always been actually the opposite of what I've communicated to the kids. Like, I'm not here to replace, I'm here to add to, and vice versa. Like, they add to my life. But, you know, when I really started breaking down what he was trying to tell me, it's just that, you know, all these children are given to us. None of them are ours. You know, they are all just given to us for a time here on earth so that we can be his witness to them, you know, show his love to them through our acts. And I feel like what he kind of broke out of me was, you know, I was actually serving them and expecting a reward. So really I was placing myself on the highest seat. Right? Like wanting them to look at me. But what he was saying is, you need to get down. You know, I'm actually on that highest seat, and your acts need to serve me so that I can bless them through you. And it was really a shift in how I approached them. How I approached, like, it turned my heart into a more pure form, which is, I think, what a refining does, right? And I think blended families, you know, they can either define us, which a lot of times through the chaos it starts to, or they can refine us. And we can look at, like, okay, why is this triggering me? And what is this saying about me? Because it's never about the other person. Triggers are a direct reflection of what's going on inside of us. And we can only look at those triggers and say, okay, I need to work on this so that I look more like him at the end of this refining. And so that's really the guts of the study. So it's laid out like a 6-week study. There's 5 days of work a week. And it's written really for men, women, couples. I tried to keep it as open as possible. So it's a lot of my own self story. So I feel like it tends to lean more towards a woman audience, but the feedback I've gotten is that it doesn't. Hopefully that's the case, because my intent was really to do couples work and change individual hearts, you know, purify hearts through God's refining process. And I think blended families are the perfect opportunity to do that. There's just so much dynamic that brings about heat within ourselves that we can work through.
In the book, you talk about the hierarchy of the home, and we've talked about this multiple times on our podcast, keeping God at the top. Our spouse, and then our children, and then work and hobbies all come kind of down the line. Why do you believe it's important, and what best practices do you suggest to implement?
So I believe it's important because we didn't always do it well. Like, I think that we are the example of how not to do it, and now today how to do it. And we are a total testimony to his redemption and his calling for us to preach this to others. But I feel like, you know, and talk about this in the book, that we individually have to place God first in our lives. And doing so inadvertently places God in the middle of our marriages, right? So our own relationship with God is our personal responsibilities. Husbands and wives are different. God created us uniquely, and uniquely he speaks to us and works within us. And so I find, you know, a lot working with people that they tend to compare their relationship or walk with God with their spouses, and that's just not fair. You know, I think our pastor said it so beautifully one time. He said, you know, the sun doesn't rise on the East Coast at the same time it rises on the West Coast, but the sun still rises. And that to me was just such a profound statement when you're talking about, you know, God being in your husband or wife's lives. And I think, you know, so often we compare that. So if you can set that aside and really only focus on your personal walk with God, like, that's the number one advice that we have. That's the number one way to put God first in your marriage, is just to have that working relationship with God. And a relationship goes two ways. So just like communication, like, we have to sit and listen for what he's saying to us, or look around to witness who he is in our lives, but also speak to him and take to him all of our challenges and all of the ways that we need him. So like you said, you know, Scott, you guys talk about it too, but it is and has to be, especially for blended families, God, marriage, children, others. And the entire Bible talks about, you know, not putting other gods ahead of our God. And I think he knew this was going to be a struggle for us. And so when there's brokenness and families that are born out of brokenness, which blended families typically are, and children come before the marriages, and others come before our previous marriage or our current marriage, we really have to be intentional with putting God first,
Yeah.
putting our marriages second, children third, and then anything else that falls outside of that, the other home included, so that's something that I think tends to get in the hierarchy and, understandably so,
Yeah.
but it's something you got to sort through and have open, honest conversations about, like what boundaries are going to look like and how
Absolutely.
to maintain.
Do you
Absolutely.
do you see some practical examples? Because I know we talk about this in concept,
Yep.
and I know people may be listening and going, okay, well we go to church.
Yeah.
Okay, that we go to church.
Yeah, like, what does it
and,
mean?
Yeah. So how does this
Yep.
practically roll out, and how do you see that?
I love that because I write about this in the book. One of the ways that God showed up to me in the most desperate of times. So Andy and I's marriage, like in the beginning, we hit it hard and fast. Like I don't think we really knew what we were getting into. I love him, and more so today than I did then. But because we've had some hard times, I feel like it's important to say too. So we have our own son together. He's 6. And after I had Eli, I went through postpartum depression so bad and did so many things to hide that and to cover that up. I think I wanted to be the best mom still possible for the older 2, so I didn't want to fail them in the process. And I also had some resentment and jealousy, like towards Andy, that after I had the baby, he knew what to do. Like he knew how to handle all the problems that I had no idea how to, because he had been through it before and not with me. So that was something I was not expecting to face as a challenge. Like you just don't know what you don't know until the situation arises. And for me, that was it. And so that sent me also down this like deep, dark, black hole for 10 months. So I went with that untreated. And I'm telling you that to say, there was one day that this mom, and her name's Melissa, and to this day I talk about her saving my life, but it was actually the day that I went to go get on antidepressants. Like I knew I had to do it. I was kicking and fighting and screaming the whole time because of course I'm not sick. Like I've worked in the field of mental health for over 10 plus years and I know the symptoms, but can't possibly happen to me, right? So I'd been to the doctor, I was driving home, I was so hungry, but I was just like, I was done, I was exhausted. And I get this text from Melissa and she said, hey, I left soup and a book on your doorstep for you. And I just stopped in that moment. I'm like, well, that's really cool. Like, that's really something I didn't expect. And later on down the line, I realized like that was God. Like that was God speaking to me in a way that mattered the most. Like obviously I wrote a book, words matter to me, and obviously he knew that. And she was not even like that close of a friend. Like we didn't really do life together, but for whatever reason, she obeyed in that moment and I received God in that moment. And I think my greatest advice, because I think people say that all the time, like, well, we don't hear God talking to us, or I don't understand what that looks like, or I don't know how that feels. Like the moments that bring you the most joy, like if you can just pause and consider, like, what is the moment that brings me the most joy? And sometimes it's as little as soup on a doorstep. Like sometimes it's really, really mundane things, but like that brought me joy in that moment. Yeah. So when I paused and I looked back and I realized like that soup and that book dug me out of a hole just a little bit, right? Like it just got me a little bit out of that hole. And God was in that moment. And so I think a lot of times we don't need to open our ears, we need to open our eyes. Yeah. And if we can just look around and feel and see what it is that brings us joy, that's where we start. Like that's where we start our individual relationship with God. It's a relationship. Yeah. And then one other thing I've done, as more recently in the editing of the book, I picked up it's called Read the Bible in 90 Days. And it's like an actual Bible that says, read the Bible in 90 days. And the cover's not too cute, but I got a book cover for it. And it literally, it changed my life. And not just because I can say I've read the Bible cover to cover, which anybody that probably knows me that's watching this is highly doubtful of that. Like I actually did it. And it changed my life because it took away all the distractions. Like you read 12 pages a day, which doesn't sound like that much, but 12 pages a day it's a lot, because it's dense content. So it took away all the distractions. So what I realized was when I'm truly focused on him is really when he can speak and show up. Yeah. And so, that was a great tool for me to have to build that relationship with him. So it's just little steps. Like you just got to take little steps, and it's your relationship is your responsibility, and nobody else can do that for you.
Can you speak about how keeping your marriage above your children is played out in practicality?
Yeah. So what's so fun in asking about the hierarchy piece, Andy and I totally agreed when we married that our marriage would come before the children. And that sustained for a while, but what we left out was God. So like when we would put each other on the highest step, and we would let each other down because we do, you know. I have a lot of previous trust issues and some deep childhood stuff that we've worked through counseling. But when Andy would let me down, I would mistake that for trust. So I would think like, I can't trust him anymore, you know? And so then that's kind of where we would spiral. But before we got married, we agreed, and I was like, at this point, adamantly so, but because I'm controlling, so that's another whole nother issue, but adamantly so, like our marriage was gonna come first, like that's what's gonna happen. And Andy was like, absolutely, like that was his belief system as well, so we thought that would work. For us, it was kind of reversed, like, so the children aren't biologically, the older two children aren't biologically mine, and I ended up leaving my job to be a stay-at-home parent for them and with them when we moved up to McKinney. And what happened was I had taken everything that I wanted out of my career that I was receiving, right? Like all of that affirmation of just how great of a employee I was, or you know, how great of a job I did. So I basically replaced that with the kids' work, like so, you know, PTO president and room mom and all the things that started to define me. So where we tripped up was actually me putting my step kiddos in that hierarchy, because we didn't have God first, you know. So really the key and why I think it's so hard is because the kids do come first, you know, like, and for most people, you know, Andy bringing the kids into the marriage, it was a tricky situation. It took a lot of trust for him to say, you know what, I'm going to put my marriage first. But what we knew to be true, and what we know for sure to be true today, is that putting God first and the marriage second is a ministry to those children, because they've witnessed brokenness, and we want them to understand that marriage matters. Like it really does matter, and we're not perfect, and they've seen us every way from Sunday messed up, you know, but they see us fixing it too. And I just think it's so important for the God marriage dynamic to be what it is, because children can't bear the weight of the relationship. Putting them in that highest seat, I think places them on a pedestal that they'll actually never get off of, you know, ever. And then they feel failed, and they feel like they can't meet expectations, and it sets them up for failure. You know, their little minds aren't meant to handle adult matters or be in the middle of adult relationships. And so putting God first is such a model for them, you know, and then witnessing our marriage, how they see God's love, I think relays the foundation over some of those cracks that they had when they were little. Yeah.
No, that's good.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and if you could give any encouragement to our audience today, Summer, you know, if you had a blended family sitting right here, what would you want to impart to them?
I think probably if I had somebody looking me straight in the face, you know, I think telling me that it all takes time. Like it just all takes time to navigate. It takes time to understand. It takes time to appreciate each other, to build relationships. You know, I think we walk into marriages a lot of times naive, like whether it's your first or fifth, because you don't really understand the challenges to come. Like you just don't know what you don't know. And you can't understand what you're going to go through until you're in the middle of the mess. And for blended families, there's just so many dynamics inside and outside the home that take time. It takes time to navigate. And I think an important understanding of the failure rate for blended families too gives power to you. Like, so to understand, you know, blended families fail at a higher rate even than first marriages. And to know that is to have power over it. And if we can know, look, the enemy's gonna be working extra hard because we have cracks in our hearts that, you know, may or may not be healed from our past. You know, he's going to know that he has gotten us to walk away once before. And I think is able to say to us, just do it again, like just walk away. And when we've done it once, it's easier to do it twice, right? And so we have to just understand that there's so many dynamics that need to be addressed, that need to be worked through, that in a blended family are going to take time to identify. It's going to take time for situations to arise, to know even how to handle those, and to have support. Like I think the best thing that we have done and I have done is found a group of moms and stepmoms that we can come together and lay it all really at Jesus' feet. And that's a unique group of women to have, because a lot of worldly ways and worldly groups want to play into the drama. And our goal is really to pray up, so we don't want to play into the drama. We want to pray up to God and ask him for strength, ask him to deliver what all of this chaos is saying about us. Like, how can we walk out of that group or that support system and be a light, be a better servant of his kingdom, and use our dynamics to do that in a healthy way.
Hey friends, we hope that this episode is blessing your socks off right now, and we just want to take an opportunity to talk about partnering together. If Blended Kingdom Families has touched your marriage and touched your blended family in some way, we'd love to partner with you.
At Blended Kingdom Families, we're trying to reach as many blended families as possible, and we can do more with your support. So please take an opportunity to visit blendedkingdomfamilies.com and click partner. Hope you enjoy the rest of the episode.
Well, last question, Summer. Blended Kingdom Families, our ministry name, but what to you is a Blended Kingdom family?
Gosh, I feel like a Blended Kingdom family is a family that honors God first, and that uses him in the middle of their family, in the middle of their mess, in the middle of their lives, to deliver who he is among not only your nuclear family, but you be an influence and a light to those around, even the closest, people around you that you may not necessarily have chosen to be around. But I think we have such an opportunity to be a light to him, to be refined, to walk out this process different, to break the generational curse of brokenness. And I think we do that by God and God alone and his grace. And I think, you guys have just such a beautiful mission and ministry.
You too.
And so thank you. I'm so glad that we can partner and do it together. And
so are we. And it has been
so good.
Absolutely amazing hearing your story about your book and, just your heart for blended families and what you've gone through and how that can better help people who are on this journey.
Yeah.
I'm shocked. The nuggets are here.
For sure. Huge. I know. I was like, that's a good one line. So is that.
Obviously,
So
God is really working in your life.
Absolutely.
And so excited. Your book comes out July 29th.
Yes.
So
Aligning the hierarchy of heart and home. So thank you so much for being here.
Guys.
It's been amazing.
We love you.
Love you.
Guys, thanks so much for tuning in and joining us today. So excited and thankful for Summer's heart to be here with us. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Be blessed in all that you do. So
Summer.
Good. Oh my gosh.
Rocking.
Yeah, totally rocking
amazing.
it. Yes.
Yeah.
Hey BKF community, we want to hear from you guys. If you would take the time to leave us a review, and you can find us on all social media platforms. Our podcast is on every podcast platform, and you can visit us at our website at www.blendedkingdomfamilies.com.
Yeah, guys, we're trying to reach every blended family all over the world, and we can't do this without your partnership. So please take a minute, share, comment, review, tell your friends. Tell them they can all go to blendedkingdomfamilies.com for great resources.